Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today to discuss the really critical issue of marine plastics in East Asia and the Pacific. Now, we know this is a region that includes some of the world's biggest plastic producers and consumers and generates a huge amount of mismanaged plastics and waste that affects our oceans, our coastlines, rivers, and waterways. And with the scale of plastics pollution growing significantly in recent years, this has become a global development issue. Now, my name is Sharanjeet Lail, and I'll be moderating today's event. Over the next hour, we'll be exploring what governments, the private sector, and other partners are doing to actively tackle this issue. We'll hear from a range of speakers, from ministers and the private sector, as well as social activists and entrepreneurs. And they will share their thoughts on effective solutions that can make a real difference. And later on the program, we'll see some concrete examples of work in this area from civil society. And of course, we want you to be part of the conversation. So we're streaming live today at the World Bank Live platform and social media channels. If you've got any questions you'd like answered, head over to live.worldbank.org and post it there. We'll be running a live poll as well throughout the event. I'll give you more details on that shortly. Please use as well the hashtag #BeatPlasticPollution to share your thoughts throughout this event. Again, that hashtag is #BeatPlasticPollution. Now, let me start our event today by introducing a video message from the World Bank Group President David Malpass to share his opening remarks.
Ministers and colleagues, I'd like to speak to you today about the crisis of plastic waste. It's a global challenge with high costs and major impacts on ecosystems and human health and development. The impacts of plastics as they leak into waterways and oceans on key economic sectors like tourism and fisheries have become much more apparent. There's no silver bullet to tackling marine plastic pollution, but there are concrete actions we can take. Fiscal and regulatory policy reforms can create incentives to improve waste management systems and reduce plastic use. We must improve solid waste management, especially in coastal areas and along waterways. This requires both appropriate regulations and behavior change so waste is collected, processed, and disposed of in environmentally sustainable manners. In the case of plastic waste, segregation at the source, recycling and reuse, river waste collection facilities, and sustainable disposal are all critical. Creating better connections between supply, meaning the waste collections and management, and demand for sustainably recovered plastic waste would unlock more private sector solutions and recycling markets. There's much potential to scale this up in emerging markets. The World Bank Group is working with our partners in the public and private sector to address this challenge. Since 2000, we've committed more than $5 billion to improve solid waste management around the world, and our project pipeline in this area totals more than $2 billion. We're particularly active in the East Asia and Pacific region, including through our close partnership with the ASEAN member states to develop a regional action plan to combat marine plastics. IFC, our private sector arm, is supporting private sector interventions in the circular economy and waste management infrastructure. For example, IFC is looking to support Indorama Ventures, a leading petrochemicals producer with a global footprint, in expanding its recycled PET capacity in targeting emerging markets. The World Bank is supporting governments such as Cambodia and Indonesia to improve solid waste management, including collection, to make recycling markets more transparent, profitable, and sustainable, to put in place policies to reduce single-use plastics use, and to improve systems to track how effective these measures are. In China, we have reoriented our program toward global public goods, including reduction in marine plastics. Let's support people, governments, and private companies who are taking action to incentivize and improve waste management in our cities, at home, and for industries, to develop new and innovative waste management at scale, and to reuse and clean up plastic waste where it is generated rather than once it is in the oceans. Thank you for your attention, and I wish all of you good health, safety, and success.
David Malpass, the president of the World Bank Group, for those very important comments and really for setting the stage for this upcoming discussion. And now we're going to open our poll for this session. And the question we're asking today is, what is the most important thing to do to beat plastic pollution? And for the purposes of this poll, we've had to narrow down the choices to 4 options. Number 1, stronger regulations governing single-use plastics. Number 2, promoting reduction, reuse, and recycling. Number 3, redesign plastic products to be easier to reuse and recycle. And lastly, to make better choices as consumers and use less single-use plastics. So do take part in this poll. We'd like to see how the votes are stacking up. And to do that, you can go to the World Bank Live page. Once again, that's live.worldbank.org. Now, large-scale problems, we know, like marine plastics, can seem insurmountable. But to respond, governments and people in the region are proactively taking steps and educating people. They're developing action plans, implementing policies and incentives, and expanding solid waste management collection to reduce the flow of waste in the waterways. So let's take a look at this short video for some inspiring examples.
The East Asia and Pacific region is at the very heart of our planet's marine plastic pollution crisis. Beyond the impacts on our way of life and possibly our health, the economic costs of marine debris, including to tourism, to fishing, and shipping, is estimated at around $10.8 billion for countries in the APEC region. The COVID-19 pandemic has compounded the problems of marine plastic pollution, with a surge in personal protective equipment and medical waste, adding pressure on existing waste systems. Yet there is a clear determination across governments, NGOs, communities, and businesses to solve this issue. Many countries in the region are already emerging as champions in the fight against plastic waste.
My name is Danone. I'm a team leader for trash monitoring at Stung Canal. Plastic pollution in Cambodia is one of the most challenges in our country. Being a human citizen, I feel very shocked, and it should not happen. It should be under control, not allow this happen. My team and I are conducting trash monitoring on this drainage canal by using drone technology. And the objective of work is to identify what type of trash that people throw in the canal. If we can find out the sources of the trash, we can impose the strategy like decreasing the amount of production of the plastic. And we hope that after this work, all the people will know exactly how the trash that is thrown in the water impacts to the environment and eventually impact to people themselves. For me, I have a strong optimistic hope that this work, after collecting and analyze all the data, it will give to the Cambodian government or the NGOs a better data to figure out the strategy to reduce the production of the plastic. In the next 10 years, I'm able to come here again, and I hope everything clean. And all the bank of the canal will be very clean, there's no trash, and the people will be smile because there's no trash in front of their house. And I hope it will happen, and we together can do it.
Tôi tên là Nguyễn Lê Thăng Long, hiện đang là Giám đốc Ban Nghiên cứu và Phát triển của Tập đoàn An Phát Holding. Thì Việt Nam là một trong những cái quốc gia hiện nay hàng đầu về cái vấn đề ô nhiễm rác thải nhựa. Thì ở An Phát thì chúng tôi hướng tới là sử dụng các sản phẩm phân hủy sinh học. Chúng tôi cũng đầu tư vào các hệ thống xử lý rác thải để đảm bảo rằng là tất cả những cái sản phẩm rác thải về nhựa sau khi sử dụng xong thì sẽ được xử lý. Khi sản xuất thì có thể tạo ra được những cái sản phẩm phế, thì những cái sản phẩm đó thì gần như là đến 99% là đều được quay đầu trong cái quy trình sản xuất của chúng tôi. Chúng tôi cũng mong muốn rằng trong thời gian không xa, tại thị trường Việt Nam sẽ có những cái tiêu chuẩn về các sản phẩm phân hủy sinh học để chúng ta có thể phân biệt được đâu là sản phẩm phân hủy sinh học và đâu là các sản phẩm không phân hủy sinh học. Trong 10 năm tới, tập đoàn An Phát xác định vẫn luôn là tập đoàn nhựa, công nghệ cao và thân thiện với môi trường. Và để thực hiện điều đấy thì chúng tôi cũng đã đầu tư xây dựng nhà máy sản xuất các nguyên liệu phân hủy sinh học hoàn toàn tại Việt Nam, và nhà máy đó sẽ là ưu tiên cho thị trường Việt Nam hàng đầu. Tuy nhiên, An Phát không thể đi một mình được. Chúng tôi rất hy vọng rằng là sẽ được chung tay, có sự đóng góp từ chính phủ, từ các doanh nghiệp Việt Nam cũng như doanh nghiệp nước ngoài tại Việt Nam và toàn bộ xã hội. Chỉ có cái sự đóng góp chung tay đó thì chúng ta mới có thể là thay đổi được cái vấn đề về rác thải nhựa này.
My name is Gede Robi. I am a musician. I am vocalist and guitarist of a Bali-based rock band Navikula, and I am also a farmer. My band Navikula has been using music as the platform to amplify social and environmental issues. So Full of Plastic is a series of behavior change campaign, and we encourage or engage the collaboration between government, corporate, and then community in general to find a win-win solution. And we know actually the plastic pollution issue is a global issue, but we believe there is a solution on the local scale. Start small first, and we believe this influence can be bigger. In Full of Plastic, we use lots of local wisdom and traditional approach for this behavior change among the community. If the government can implement their regulation and then all the corporates redesign their products packaging and people change their behavior, so the success in the big picture, I see if there is a harmonious balance between people still making profit, it's like the prosperity of the people, and also in the same way we preserve our environmental and also we save the future. So this is the holistic ideal condition that we want to achieve.
The World Bank Group is dedicated to addressing plastic pollution at every stage of the plastic life cycle. We are working with more than 40 countries to reduce single-use plastics usage, prevent pollution, and increase circularity, with support from the World Bank's Pro-Blue program, the Korean Green Growth Trust Fund, and others. We have more than $2 billion worth of projects in our pipeline across sectors including agriculture, fisheries, transport, and tourism. There's considerable work already underway. We're working in partnership with ASEAN to deliver a new regional action plan that will develop a roadmap of regional activities aligned with national actions, drive collaboration across shared river systems and coastlines, and advance our goals towards a circular economy for plastics. We are working with governments across East Asia and the Pacific to reduce and ultimately end the use of single-use plastics, to drive plastic recycling and reduce plastic leakage into water systems. And through the International Finance Cooperation, or IFC, we are working with some of the region's biggest companies to push for circular economy business models through investments in materials, sustainable packaging, and climate-smart waste management. This is the time for action. We have the champions to drive this action and the knowledge to target our efforts from source to sea. And we are ready to get to work.
Wow, some really amazing examples there. I'm sure you'll agree they're all really inspiring. Now, once again, if you're just tuning in, I'm Sharonjeet Lail, and you're watching a World Bank live event. This is Marine Plastics in East Asia and the Pacific, the challenges and opportunities. I'm now pleased to welcome our high-level panel. We're really fortunate today to have senior government officials from 3 countries, as well as senior representatives from 2 companies, all of whom are leaders on the marine plastics agenda. Welcome, everyone. We're going to be hearing about what these countries are doing to address the plastic crisis, how regional solutions can further support these efforts, and we will explore the importance of regional cooperation for harmonized policies, standards and metrics, and regional recycling markets and plastic waste trade. And finally, we're going to be discussing the critical role of the private sector in addressing marine plastics through technology, financing, and business model innovations on both supply and the demand side. So, before I kick off with specific questions to each of our panelists, may I remind you that we've only really got 35 minutes for this discussion, so if you could keep your answers fairly short. And we do want to hear from all of you because you've all got very important messages. I'd like to kick off first with a quick question to all of you, and please don't take more than a minute to answer. And this is really a question of how urgent the situation is in plastics in this region, and give us a sense of what you hope to come out of today's session. So let's start with His Excellency Pak Luhut Panjaitan. He's the Coordinating Minister of Maritime Affairs and Investment from Indonesia. Pak Luhut, to you, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. And first of all, I congratulate this event. I think it's very good. And Indonesia is the largest archipelagic country, and Indonesia realized the urgency of the moment early on the committed to address this issue through the National Marine Debris Action Plan for 2018-2025. It provides strategic direction for all line ministries to contribute to the marine debris reduction goal through a wide array of interventions. Our coordinating minister coordinates action from several line ministries, partners particularly with the private sector and civil society organization, are needed to achieve our ambition goals. Private sector leadership is needed for designing alternatives to plastics, including packaging, which is one of the most important contributors of plastic pollution in our country. We are also entering our 2nd year of implementation of the Citarum River program to improve waste management at what once was one of the most polluted rivers in the world. But if you look at now, the result after 2 years, a lot of progress over there. You cannot recognize anymore the river because before really very polluted river. The COVID-19 pandemic has made the marine debris challenge even more acute in Indonesia, especially considering the increase of medical and plastic packaging waste as found by the Indonesian Institute of Science, LIPI, recently. The budget constraint from the pandemic economic downturn also constrained much needed investment, particularly in waste management and in providing incentive for the development of alternatives to plastic. Hence, private sector bold action are needed than ever. That's I think what happened now in Indonesia, and we are really working very hard for that because we understand this is not the Indonesian problem. This is I think the global problem. Thank you.
For that. We can go now very quickly to Dr. Ta Din Thi. He's the Director General of the Administration of Seas and Islands at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Vietnam. Dr. Thi, over to you. Interrupt you. I think we are having some trouble hearing you. Okay, we're going to try to establish Dr. T's microphone. We're still having some trouble hearing you at the moment.
Do you hear me? Okay.
Yes, perfect. We hear you now. Marvelous.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. T. If you
Thank you very
can
much.
quickly sum up
Good
what we
morning,
hope to get.
ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of our Minister Excellency Chen Hong-ha, I would like to present something in this virtual meeting. As you know, Vietnam has made responding to the challenge of marine plastic a priority, including through the National Action Plan for Management of Marine Plastic Litter by 2030. Beyond their borders, as the current chair of ASEAN, Vietnam has also efforts to make marine plastic regional priority. Over the last few years, we have made important steps both at the national and regional level to combat marine plastic solution. In today's session, we hope to provide our voice to reaffirm our commitment to this agenda. As a national level, marine plastic is the part of our larger strategy to operationalize Vietnam national marine strategy. As a regional, we are using our chairmanship of ASEAN to advance on marine plastic solution across the region. We would like to, in this session, to result in a further call on to action, where the leaders from public and private sector, research agency, and communities all work in coordination toward common goal of plastic circularity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. T, for your opening remarks. I can move on now to Corinne Tapp, and she's the Senior Vice President of Danone Waters Indonesia and Southeast Asia. Corinne, your thoughts, please.
Well, I think I'm very happy, by the way, to be part of this meeting. Thank you very much. And it's great to see also Pa Luhut here. Selamat pagi, Pa. I think Danone has done quite a great deal to contribute because as core of our belief is to develop sustainable business for the health of people and the health of the planet. And when I talk to my part of the world, in particular in Indonesia, where we have a very strong business with the Aqua brand, our mission is to provide water and hydration for all, but also ensure and doing that whilst ensuring the health of people and the planet. And this is at the heart of every decision that we take at Aqua. Currently, we need plastic packaging to deliver this mission, and obviously plastic has also served us really well because it has given access to safe food and beverages to many people in a very affordable way. But there's also downsides, obviously, and single-use plastic is damaging our environment if it ends up in nature. And also plastic is made from crude oil, a rapidly depleting resource, and as a result of that has a negative impact on climate change. So we need to come up with viable and scalable alternatives to stop plastic waste, and this is also why we have developed a long-term commitment, which is called the Movement of Bijak by Plastic, where we aim to be 100% circular by 2025. And we also see this is not something we do alone. We do this in collaboration with all stakeholders, the government, NGOs, but also other corporates, so that we can build collectively a different systemic way of solving this issue.
Great to hear from you, Corinne. Thank you for that. I can now move on to Mr. Yash Lohia. He's the Executive Director and Chief Sustainability Officer of Indorama Ventures, for some opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sharanjeet. Thank you to the World Bank for having me. I'd like to thank the President also to highlighting how Indorama Ventures is working with the World Bank and IFC to help collection rates, help recycling. Good morning, Your Excellencies. Good morning, Ms. Tapp. So firstly, I want to talk about, there are thousands of different types of plastics. Just to introduce Indorama Ventures, our core business is PET, and PET is only one type of plastic. The total plastic industry is about 350 million tons, whereas the PET industry is about 28 million tons, so roughly 8% of the total plastic industry. PET plastic is the most commonly used plastic for beverage bottles. PET bottles are easily recyclable and the most recycled plastic in Southeast Asia and the world. PET is about 1/3 of the plastic packaging today. But because it is the most collected plastic packaging in the world, it is also a smaller proportion of plastic waste. But let me be clear, one recyclable PET bottle ending up as waste is not acceptable. PET and recycled PET has been approved as safe for food contact by the FDA, by Health Canada, by the European Food Safety Authority, and that is why governments are passing laws to collect PET bottles, not limit them. Collection is one of the major challenges, of course, but it's also the misconception around plastics and PET. If consumers switch to packaging alternatives that have a higher carbon footprint, such as aluminum cans or glass bottles, that will be hurting the planet. Ignoring the inefficient collection systems we have is also a major problem when it comes to collection. Should any of us, taxpayers, industry, brands, or retailers, pay for collection systems that are inefficient? We don't think so. So that's something that we want to hear more about in today's session. And there's nothing any of us can do if even a small group of people dispose of packaging irresponsibly. So we must adopt a zero-tolerance approach to littering and dumping. Thank you.
Certainly, I think you all get across the idea of just how urgent the situation is and how we really need to act now. I can return now to His Excellency Pak Luhut. You talked a little bit about how Indonesia has really been a front runner in tackling marine pollution. I believe we've just lost Pak Luhut as I was asking that question. I hope we can get him back. But as you know, this is a live virtual event and these sort of things do happen. If I can't get Pak Luhut back, I may address my next question to Dr. T from Vietnam. Let's go to you, Dr. T. You also talked about the crucial role that Vietnam is playing in this area. Of course, Vietnam is chairing the ASEAN community this year, and you're speaking on behalf of ASEAN to some extent. So could you briefly describe for us the impetus and resolve of Vietnam to address the marine plastics challenge? I mean, your Prime Minister launched a campaign to ban single-use plastic nationwide by 2025. So how is the government moving forward with this, and what are some of the challenges you face?
Thank Madam says. The way that the government is moving forward on this commitment. Right after the Prime Minister launched the campaign, the ministry and sector and localities have been actively implementing many synchronous solutions, such as to minimize the use of single-use plastic products at work and in conference, seminar, meeting, anniversaries, and other events, and prioritize the session of recycled and environmentally friendly products. To promote propaganda and popularization to raise awareness about the impact of using non-disposal and single-use plastic bags, the benefits of using alternative products, environmentally friendly plastic bags through diversification of communication channels, and review and propose to amend the mechanism and policy to minimize increased recycling, reuse, and prevent the harmful effect of plastic waste on the environment. To mobilize trade centers, supermarkets, shops, traditional markets, hotels, restaurants, tourist resorts, and production, business, tourism, establishment, etc., in the locality to make a commitment on reducing plastic waste, limiting the use of single-use plastic item, or replacing with environmentally friendly products. Promotes innovation, creativity, research, and transfer of technologies to produce environmentally friendly materials to replace the plastic in production and business, such as the plastic material decomposing in seawater, biological plastic material, promotes and supports scientific and technological research tasks related to recycling and treatment of plastic waste. Applies national technical regulation related to recycling and treatment of plastic waste. And for the main challenges, we think that there are some efforts. The consumer still have the habits of using plastic bags mainly due to their convenience. And the cost of plastic bags is low, making it difficult and for consumers to change their habits of using plastic bags in their daily life. Environmentally friendly products are not yet widely sold as the convenience store, and these products need to be recognized as meeting the quality standard of national authority. Promotion and marketing of products to consumer need to be encouraged. And third one, waste is not yet separated as source, leading to unsatisfactory quality of waste for treatment and recycling technologies. That is the main challenges. Thank you.
That we are awaiting the replacement for Pak Luhut to come on board. I believe we will be joined shortly by Dr. Nani Hendiarti, the Deputy for Coordination of Environmental Management and Forestry for Maritime Affairs and Investments. And she'll be joining us very shortly, I hope. We are trying to re-establish the connection to Indonesia and Jakarta. But before we go to that, let's have a look at, I believe Ibu Nani can join us now. Thank you so much, Ibu Nani. We have you and we can see you, and hopefully we can hear you too. So I would like to thank you for joining us. We were talking earlier to Pak Luhut, who was talking about how Indonesia really has been a front runner in tackling marine pollution. He talked about the National Marine Debris Action Plan, which aims to reduce plastics in the ocean by 70% by 2025. So tell us, how well is Indonesia doing with this target, and what is the greatest challenge to achieving it? Ibu Nani, can you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear also? Okay.
Yes, we are hearing you.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. For the question, apologize that Minister Luhut has to leave the meeting with the. Your question, how we implement our plan of actions with the ambitious targets. We work with the cross ministries. The keyword that we use is we have 5 strategies. Yeah, which is the 5 strategies is the first is behavior change, and the second is how to reduce the pollution, plastic pollution in the ocean, and the third one, how to handle the plastic waste in material, and the fourth one is about the innovation, and also the last one is about the research and development. So regarding innovation is also very, and then we use this for it. Innovation is needed along the entire of the plastic cycle to redesign product, create the new supply chain, and also in the consumer materials and materials substitutes. So also improving the feedstock and maximizing the recyclability of the product while improving the financing sustainability of the recycling based on all things hard and standard are critical milestone in part of the how to tackle the marine. So Indonesia began this journey road program in 2017. Single-use plastic in asphalt to develop roads and by both the government and private sectors in many provinces. It also accelerate the construction of the waste-to-energy processing, such as the waste-to-energy pilot project in Bantar Gebang in Jakarta, Bekasi, with productivity of the 100 tons and which can produce 700 kilowatt of electricity. So this project has been proposed to be expanded to other 12 cities. So recently, we have also launched a refuse-derived fuel facility in Java, the most populated island in Indonesia. RDF facilities have the potential to be developed along Indonesia. Cement industries and power plants. Level, Indonesia has implemented many innovative local the banning of the single-use plastic and the development of the fiscal instrument simple waste service to enhance financial sustainability management. I think that's example what we have done. So we are working with the other stakeholders to enlarge these activities. So thank you.
Thank you again, and terima kasih. We were having some trouble hearing your audio, but I think we got the sense of what you were saying and the strides that Indonesia is making to try to achieve this banning of single-use plastics. Now, next up, I'd like to go to His Excellency Say Samal. He's the Minister of Environment from Cambodia, and he has sent us a video. In the opening video, we saw that Cambodia was taking really innovative approaches to addressing marine plastics, such as drone monitoring over sections of the river to identify, top plastics products leaked into waterways. So we can hear from His Excellency Say Samal now, first giving us an overview of the challenges Cambodia faces and how it's working to try to improve the situation. Let's go to his video now.
Enriched waste management is one of our top priorities, particularly solid waste management in Phnom Penh City is currently undergoing a profound reform. Reform include the division of Phnom Penh into 3 zones, a new management and payment system, the establishment of transfer stations, and a regional landfill. This major reform will also become a model for solid management system in other municipalities, especially in Siem Reap and in Senopil. Additionally, the Ministry of Environment has been working on decentralizing the solid waste management function to subnational level, and we have put in place various policy and legal framework and technical guidelines to this end. We have also provided technical as well as financial support to subnational administration, including provision of waste management equipment, as well as organization of trained training workshop on waste management for district governors and commune chief.
And that was the Minister of Environment in Cambodia giving us a bit of an overview of the challenges that Cambodia faces and what it's doing. But next up, we can go to our private sector participants. I mean, we heard from Corinne just a little earlier. You were talking about how Danone has done a great deal to look at the future of plastics and how to try to drive sustainability through product designs. And Danone Aqua, you talked about, has pledged to recover more plastic than it uses in Indonesia, including through interception of marine littering. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing. I mean, on the website, Danone says it will launch 100% recycled PE bottles in all major water markets. Tell us what kind of challenges and limitations you see for scale-up of such circular economy models.
Well, what I can say as the short answer is it takes a long time. You need to be patient, and it takes a long time and a lot of effort with a lot of stakeholders. So let me share briefly the story of Aqua, because I think it's quite exemplary for the journey and the effort it takes as well. In 1994, actually, we launched our first returnable 90-liter water jug, which is a fully 100% returnable model, one of the best practice as mentioned by Ellen MacArthur, and is now 70% of our business. Then in 2010, when we started to look at ways to get more feedstock to start our PET in our total bottle collection, we realized that we had to build up a full inclusive infrastructure model, including the waste pickers as part of the system, make them part of that, giving them access to healthcare and health access, and build up an infrastructure that is now approximately collecting 13,000 tons of PET every year that goes straight back into our bottles. But then we realized this is still not enough. So that's why 2 years ago we launched also to support the government of Indonesia, as Pa Luhut was saying, this very strong ambition of reducing 70% of marine waste by 2025. We wanted to support that. So we launched our plastic pledge and the movement Bijak by Plastic, so be wise about plastic. And there's basically 3 pillars in this movement and in our commitment. The first is collection, because collection is the key, and collection is the huge challenge in Indonesia. So indeed, we said by 2025, we want to collect more plastic than we produce. And actually in the island of Bali, that is already the case. Then the second pillar is education, because this is working also with consumers and making them more conscious about how they can actually be smart about plastic, segregating straight at the source, etc., but also giving them more education about how they can be more choiceful in choosing the right products, and also choosing brands that are, for example, B Corp brands, which means that they have a very strong commitment towards sustainability. And the last pillar is around product innovation. And we said we want all our packaging to be 100% recyclable, reusable, or compostable. And we use packaging innovation to lead the way and show that it's possible to have circular models. I know that some of you have been wondering what's next to me, and this is indeed a PET water bottle, which might be a little bit controversial in this session, right? But I'm actually very proud to show this bottle and to drink from this bottle, because this is the first 100% RPET bottle that was produced in Indonesia, and it's one of the first bottles that Danone was actually able to produce. So being able to doing that in Indonesia in a socially inclusive way, working together with all our stakeholders and partners, made us actually really proud, but also demonstrated that it is really possible to develop circular models in countries as Indonesia as anywhere else. But coming back to your question, it does require a lot of time and a lot of commitment, and it's not as easy as doing a pilot and then scaling it up, because every situation is different, and it requires deep understanding of the local environment and of the local stakeholders, and working together with them, making sure that ultimately this becomes an economically sustainable model for this to be truly sustainable. So, but having been in this role now for 4 years and having made a lot of progress with the team, I am very confident that this is possible. And if we would all work together, then we are able to actually make this change and to reach the ambition that Pa Luhut and his team were sharing just now before.
Yeah, Thank you for that, Corinne. Really great to hear. And thank you for holding up that bottle and explaining it a little to us. We were a bit worried it was single-use plastic, but of course not in this session. And as you say, 2021, it's not that far away, and it's an incredible example of what's being done. We can now move to Yash again, Yash Lohia from Indorama Ventures, otherwise known as IVL. You talked about how, of course, it is a global leader in PET resin manufacturing and recycling, really a key supplier to a lot of leading food and beverage brands. So tell us a little bit about what's motivated your company to voluntarily commit to recycle some 50 billion bottles of PET annually. And of course, it's also invested about $1.5 billion in new recycling capacity by 2025. So have these commitments changed due to COVID-19 and falling oil prices? Explain to us a little bit of the context of what's going on now. Oh, yes, we're having some trouble hearing you. Great, we are hearing you now.
So IVL got into PET resin manufacturing back in 1995. And since then, we've grown our capacities. Today, we have about a 20% market share in virgin PET globally. We have about 21 PET manufacturing plants around the world. So as that was continuing to grow, we got into the recycling business in 2011 when we acquired a company called Wellman International. That's in Netherlands and France. So with that, we got into about 80,000 tons of PET bottle recycling straight away. Back then, that was actually going towards polyester fiber. As you know, polyester fiber and polyester PET bottles come from the same raw material. So you can turn a plastic bottle into a polyester fiber or a plastic bottle back into a plastic bottle. Since then, we've continued to increase our capacities. We're now also producing recycled PET in the US, in France, in Poland, in Brazil. And at the moment, we have about 250,000 tons annually of PET recycling capacity. Our goal is to get that 250,000 tons to 750,000 tons by 2025. And that's something that we've committed to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And we've committed $1.5 billion to achieve that target. So I believe our commercial success is tied to environmental responsibility. There is a market for sustainability. Consumers want recyclable packaging from every survey we've seen. Global brands such as Danone and other brands who are also IVL's customers have targets to increase recycled content in the beverage packaging space. By recycling 50 billion bottles per year, which equates to 750,000 tons per year, we will divert 1 million tons of waste from entering the environment or landfill or being burned. This social, political, and commercial focus on recyclability creates an opportunity to enlarge our recycling investments and make sure no PET bottles become waste. So just to reiterate, as the largest PET producer, we feel we have a responsibility, not just to our customers, but also to the environment, that we see all the PET bottles that our resin goes into be collected back. Your question was, has the pandemic affected our stance on that? No, it's not. So our commitment remains steadfast during the pandemic. In March this year, we signed a JV with Coca-Cola to build a state-of-the-art recycling plant in the Philippines. In June 2020, this year again, we acquired a PET recycling plant in Brazil that I mentioned. And in August, we also completed 2 PET plants in Poland. So we continue on our goal of achieving our 750,000 ton target.
Thank you, Yash. Now, I'm conscious of the fact we are running out of time. We really only have about 5 or 6 minutes left with all of you, our esteemed panelists. So I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about regional action plans. I mean, it's absolutely crucial that the private sector has been involved with the governments and policy side to try to develop more good policies when it comes to marine plastics. But let's take a look at the ASEAN Regional Action Plan as an important part of that solution. And to that, I could quickly go to you, Dr. T, in Vietnam, because of course, as the chair of ASEAN, Vietnam is very conscious of trying to work together with other members of Southeast Asia.
Marine plastic pollution had become an urgent global problem, an inter-regional and cross-border issue. So it's necessary to have joint efforts of each country, the region and the world. In East Asia and Southeast Asia, many national and local initiatives have been introduced to reduce the amount of plastic waste released into the ocean. In June 2019, ASEAN member states continue to adopt the Bangkok Declaration and ASEAN Framework of Action on Marine Debris as a regional action effort that could be taken to address the common challenge of plastic waste pollution. As the chair of ASEAN 2020, Vietnam recognized that plastic waste and marine plastic are one of the priorities for the implementation and emphasize the responsibility to coordinate with the government of ASEAN countries. The focus would be on sharing management model, technological innovation, and advanced solution of country in order to mobilize sustainable financial resource for effective implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. T. Now let's have a listen again to Cambodia's attempts to address the situation and the specific actions they're taking, particularly when it comes to the ASEAN framework for plastic waste. So let's hear from the Minister of Environment from Cambodia again.
We are also working closely with other development partners on social initiatives such as behavior change around solid waste management. In terms of plastic waste, the ministry has been taking an important step in plastic reducing by regulating the importation, production, distribution, and the use of plastic bags. Under this regulation, plastic bags with eco-friendly feature ban and levy on plastic bags is imposed, especially at supermarket and shopping center. Additionally, a new regulation on single-use plastic is currently being drafted with the aim to reduce plastic waste, especially at dumping sites and in the sea. Today, even on marine plastic is fit with regional and global effort in combating marine debris. ASEAN in particular has taken marine plastic as a regional priority with the endorsement of Bangkok Declaration on combating marine debris in ASEAN regions and the ASEAN Framework of Action on Marine Debris.
So that was the Cambodian minister again. It was great to hear from him. Now, we are quickly coming to the end of our session. I mean, there's so much to say about this really, really critical and important issue. But what I'd like you all to do now, and it's wonderful that we've had all of you here talking about your expertise, talking about what companies and countries in the region are doing. I'd like you all to sum up very quickly because we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left. I mean, you talked about the great strides that your countries and your companies are making, but tell us a little bit about what you will do to take this forward after our session today. I mean, what is the one pledge you can make today to move this to action beyond our conversation? Let's start with you, Ibu Nani, if you can keep your answer fairly short. I think we may have lost Ibu Nani and she's not hearing us. Well, in that case, let's quickly go to you, Corinne, from the other end. give us a sense of the one pledge you can make today to move this beyond this conversation.
So my dream is a world without waste, and making sure that whatever we do, it is circular and creates multiplier advantages, including to everybody as part of the system, but also to the planet. So in Danone and at Aqua, we believe that our vision, one planet, one health, is guidance to run our business. And after this, we will continue to fight with all our passion and convictions to make everything we do in a circular manner with all the resources that we use, and make sure that as part of that, we provide jobs and health to people, health for the people and for the planet.
That's a great message. I'll move it on to Yash now. What are you going to do to move this to action?
So I agree with Corinne as well. But in the last message, I spoke about how we've committed $1.5 billion. That's a pledge we made to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to recycle 750,000 tons. That means we have to triple our capacities from today by 2025. What I'd also add to that is we are also working on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions at our manufacturing sites. So the goal of that is to eventually create some capacities of carbon neutral PET. And that would again help our customers such as Danone in their scope 3 emissions.
Thank you, Yash. Great to hear from you and your pledge. Let's try Ibu Nani again in Indonesia. Can you hear us now, Ibu Nani? We just want to get a sense of the pledge Indonesia is making. Yes, we hear you.
Yes, thank you. I think Indonesia, we believe that we have hand in hand deal with it. So by changing our paradigm from from nothing to something. So I would like to have a collaboration, because if we can go or we can work this issue, we can have environment as well as other valuated benefit can be value economically. I think this is from us. Thank you.
Thank you. Terima kasih, Ibu Nani. I think we just about heard your very important message there. But at this point, we have run out of time with our wonderful panelists, and really want to thank them all. I hope this is a session that's provided a real call to action for all of us on marine plastics. I mean, you all represent some of the key leaders in the region on the issue, and we look forward to continuing to champion on policies, programs and commitments towards combating this critical problem of marine plastic. So once again, thank you to all our panelists for sharing their experiences and ideas. Thank you all. Thank you, that's great. Now, if you have just joined us, welcome. I'm Sharonjit Lail. We're here talking today about effective ways to accelerate policies, investments and innovations to address marine plastics in East Asia. We're using the hashtag #BeatPlasticPollution and answering your questions at live.worldbank.org. And also a reminder, there's still time to take part in our poll at the World Bank platform. The question we're asking is, what is the most important thing to do to beat plastic pollution? And you saw some of the choices earlier, so please pick one. Do you think it's stronger regulations governing single-use plastics? Do you think it's promoting reduction, reuse and recycling? Is it redesigning plastic products to be easier to use and recycle? Or finally, is it all about making better choices as consumers and using less single-use plastics? So please cast your vote at World Bank Live. That's live.worldbank.org once again. And now I'd like to introduce a short video message from ocean innovator Tiza Mafira. Now, she is the executive director of Gerakan Indonesia Diet Kantong Plastic, or the Plastic Bag Diet Movement, which is really an incredible example of how mobilizing locally can really make a big impact. So let's listen to her.
It's not the plastic that's the problem, it's the people. People need to recycle more. People need to engage in more beach cleanups. People need to purchase mindfully. We hear this a lot. In fact, it's one of the most common narratives around solutions for plastic marine debris. And it points the responsibility squarely at consumers, at you and at me. In reality, consumer choice is actually guided by external systems, either government policies or corporate marketing. We never had a need for fizzy soda drinks. There was no demand or need for straws unless you were disabled. Yet here we are today in a world where plastic soda bottles and straws dominate the litter found on shorelines. Right now, consumers are discouraged from sorting and putting things into the recycling bin due to a number of problems. Number one, recycling has not worked well in any country, not poor countries, not rich countries either. Less than 10% of plastic gets recycled worldwide. In developed countries, much of that waste gets exported to developing countries. When China banned waste imports, a 171% surge of waste imports entered into Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. Number two, packaging is poorly designed, with a single product containing multiple types of plastic which cannot be recycled together, and with questionable functions, such as to wrap a banana. Number three, consumers do not see the end product of recycling on store shelves. The cheap price of virgin plastics has caused very little demand for recycled plastic, and therefore very little is making it back up to the product supply chain. To deliver impactful change, a number of things need to happen. First of all, there needs to be a bigger corporate demand for recycled material. Right now, recycled plastic pellets simply cannot compete with virgin plastic's cheap price tag. Companies must either incorporate recycled material into their products to create a demand for it, or be more innovative and do away with single-use packaging altogether. When the circular economy is done right, we should see a decline in virgin plastic production. The government needs to support this transition. We need more fiscal incentives for environmentally friendly packaging, delivery systems, and recyclers. We need more taxes, less tax holidays for virgin plastic manufacturers. Right now is a great momentum to make fiscal incentives work better for green businesses, to build back better, as governments around the world are issuing COVID-19 fiscal stimulus packages. Next, companies need to redesign a major portion of their products so that it is easier to recycle, easier for consumers to recognize what to do with it after use, easier to pick apart, and more profitable for waste pickers. This also means that certain types of packaging must be phased out altogether. Behavioral change campaigns and policies to ban certain single-use plastics have proliferated around the world to pave way for this very transition. I co-founded the Indonesia Plastic Bag Diet movement 7 years ago for this purpose. And from the outset, we wanted big, citywide, nationwide impacts. So we worked closely with governments, subnational governments, helping them to think of how to design single-use plastic bans, how to tailor the message to their citizens, how to make sure the outcome is to see a shift to reusable bags brought by customers from their own homes, how central government can provide incentives to subnational governments to enact these policies. And after 7 years of hard work, today we've achieved what was once unthinkable. 35 cities across Indonesia have banned plastic bags, including Bali and Jakarta. And 90% of those surveyed in Jakarta are saying that they bring their own bags from home. This is our contribution to this systemic problem. Others can and should do more. Ordinary citizens can start by influencing their families, schools, and workplaces. Small businesses across the Asian continent can start reviving the beautiful woven baskets and banana leaf packaging made by local craftsmen, of which we have an abundance of. Big corporations can reinvest in refill delivery systems and more recycled content. and governments can rebalance the fiscal incentives to encourage this shift. If we all do our part, we can achieve our goals for a plastic-free ocean. Thank you.
What a fantastic story, and what a great message from Tiza for sharing that with us today. And now I'd like to turn to our next guest, His Excellency Ambassador Vegard Kale from Norway's Ambassador to Indonesia and Timor-Leste. He's here today representing the ProBlue program, which we heard a bit about earlier. Thank you for being with us here today, Ambassador. That's great. I can see you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent, and we are hearing you. Yeah. Yes, and I wanted to ask this one question to you. I mean, Norway was ProBlue's inaugural donor. It's really the country that encouraged others to join forces to address ocean health, including things like marine pollution. So tell us a little bit about why Norway has prioritized addressing marine plastics, particularly here in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I will. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. And ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a really good morning to you all. I wish, first of all, to thank the World Bank and the distinguished panelists for firmly stating the importance of fighting the marine plastic crisis. The crisis is global, but as we know, this region is its epicenter. I have been asked to give a call to action on behalf of the government of Norway, but also in capacity of Norway's co-chairmanship of ProBlue, the World Bank's program for sustainable and integrated development of marine and coastal resources. I'm proud to represent here the current donors: Canada, Denmark, the European Commission, France, Germany, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and the US. It is with some urgency I give this call to action, as we are all aware that marine plastic pollution is one of the fastest growing environmental problems, affecting the poorest among us hardest. But the picture is not all bleak. In this part of the world, Southeast Asia, governments now give much more attention to the problem of plastic pollution. Ambitious targets have been set to improve waste management and to reduce the flow of waste and plastic into the ocean. And in 2017, the United Nations Environment Assembly adopted a zero vision for marine plastic pollution, and it has passed 3 resolutions to follow it up. Still, a lot of work needs to be done, and international cooperation is the key to success. This is why my government is a strong promoter of initiatives against marine litter. To back up political commitments, my government has set up a development assistance program targeting this region especially. Our strong commitment to ProBlue comes from our wider ocean agenda, of which marine plastic pollution is an important part. ProBlue is organized around 4 pillars, focused on improved fisheries governance, marine litter and pollution management, bluing ocean sectors, and last but not least, an integrated seascape management. I believe the distinguished panelists are familiar with ProBlue activities in this region, which have funded diagnostics and assessments aimed at preventing marine plastic. Key to this is the use of innovative approaches to data collection and engagement across the value chain to enable private sector's investments in plastic waste prevention and reduction. It's my impression that there is not enough knowledge about the potential value of plastic resources. Hopefully, ProBlue can contribute to expanding this kind of knowledge. I find it reassuring that the private sector is starting to understand this value. Last month, the business call for a UN treaty on plastic pollution was launched with a number of large companies as signatories. The reason these companies commit to a global agreement is that it will create a level playing field for business actions across the globe. Many solutions to reduce plastic pollution are already available, but the private sector needs a global framework as a basis to implement them. So, in conclusion, I'm cautiously optimistic that the developments I have mentioned here will eventually deliver the zero vision on marine plastic pollution. It will take political will to make necessary changes. My hope is that ProBlue and my government can lead to such a change. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador Carlo. That was really interesting to hear about ProBlue and the initiatives that Norway is making to obviously expand on that. Thanks once again for joining us today. Now, we are coming to the final segment of our program today, and I would like now to introduce our final guest. We have Ms. Victoria Kwakwa, who's the Regional Vice President for East Asia and the Pacific for the World Bank. And we also have Mr. Alfonso Garcia Mora, the Regional Vice President for Asia and the Pacific for the International Finance Corporation. Of course, as you know, they are the hosts of today's event. So welcome to both of you. You've both been watching and listening in to our panel discussion. Let's start with you, Victoria. I mean, you were listening to that discussion from both the private sector and from Southeast Asian ministers and government representatives. How do you think the World Bank can best support ASEAN and the regional governments here to try to tackle this huge issue of marine plastics? I mean, what can the World Bank offer to really, achieve measurable regional action?
It's really exciting to hear the strong commitment of our governments, of the private sector, and of civil society to this very important cause, and to hear some of the real progress that is being made on the ground. So I'd like to thank our panelists and to thank everybody who's in the meeting today. For this event. Now, listening to the speakers, they've mentioned stopping the leakage of plastics. They've mentioned about moving more towards a circular economy. They've mentioned about policy and regulatory frameworks. And they've also talked about education and getting people to change behaviors. And I think in all of these areas, the World Bank can bring some value addition. And we are indeed trying to work with the countries in these areas. We're working with them through knowledge. The ambassador has just mentioned the importance of knowledge. Through knowledge activities, through, of course, our financial support, and also through policy advice. And all of these come together across these three areas or four areas that I've heard talked about. So in terms of stopping the leakage of plastics, what are we doing and what could we do more of? Well, first of all, we're really trying to help countries identify the sources of leakage, what and where is leaking into the river systems and eventually into the oceans. And for example, in Cambodia and Myanmar, we're using drone technology to try and help them look at the 10 top products that are leaking, as was mentioned. We're also doing similar work with China to help them find the source of pollution. And in Indonesia, we're finding the leakage hotspots as the basis for action. And then we're working with Cambodia and China and Indonesia on solid waste management, because that's really important to keep the plastics from going into the oceans. On the second area of turning more towards a circular economy, what we're really trying to do in Philippines, in Malaysia, in Vietnam, is really help assess plastics value chains so that we can really catalyze the development of recycling markets. We've seen the problems with recycling that were mentioned. And so this is another area that we're continuing to do some work on. And then on the policy and regulatory frameworks, it's really important to have the right incentives in place to have both individuals, consumers, governments, to have the private sector behave the right way and to move in the direction of the circular economy. And so here we're working with China on their pollution control policy that was just announced in January. We're also working with Malaysia on its circular economy framework. And we're working with Indonesia also around similar issues. It's the issue of fiscal incentives, plastic bans, and putting the right policies and regulatory frameworks in place so that you get the right actions and you reduce use of plastics, you encourage reuse, and you also move towards recycling. And then in education, we're really trying to launch a major campaign with the government in the region to really, and civil society groups as well, to reach out to people, to educate and to get the right behaviors on a daily basis of ordinary people, everyday people. So let me stop here. But this is a very important area for us in East Asia and the Pacific. In the World Bank, this is a major priority area for us of work, and a lot more resources are being put in there. But we're delighted to see the commitment of the government and private sector and civil society. We can't do it. You know, we can go behind them and support them. And that's the basis for our action. Thank you.
Yeah, gosh, Victoria, it sounds like the World Bank is doing a lot already in this area. But, you know, what was really crucial today and what I found really important, I'm sure as did everyone else watching, is the fact that we managed to get, you know, the government as well as the private sector to try to build these partnerships. So tell us a little bit about how, and I know you touched upon it, but tell us a little bit about how the World Bank is really using its influence to try to help build these partnerships with key stakeholders from the public and private sector.
Sure, thanks. Look, Shanjit, as you've seen, this isn't something the public sector can do alone. The private sector can't do it alone either. You need the private sector, the government, you need civil society, and everybody working together. And you need the government also to work together, you know. So we're using some of our convening power to bring some of these partnerships into being. And what we've started to do through our Singapore office is really to bring the governments together, to learn from each other, to speak to each other, and to sort of plan how to move forward. And we're delighted we've been able to do that, and including through the ASEAN platform, you know, working with the countries, the ASEAN, you heard about the marine plastics action plan that we were delighted and privileged to have the opportunity to work with them on. So the ASEAN platform helps with the government partnerships. Now, in terms of private sector, some of what we're doing in our projects and, you know, what we're doing with our sister institution, Alfonso will talk about that, the IFC, you know, fosters these partnerships, you know, where the public and the private come together. So we're doing it at the project level, at the level of communities. And of course, in all of this, civil society is key. You know, you really, they're so mobilized. You know, and again, through the projects work that we do, through some of the advocacy, reaching out to the civil society groups and fostering partnerships between the civil society and the governments, you know, through the projects that we're funding, through the analytic work that we do. And when we go out to do the campaigns, we're going to work very closely with civil society as well. So lots of opportunities that we're really trying to seize. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. That was a great message there, and so good to hear what the World Bank's doing. And in fact, you mentioned Alfonso now, and I can bring him into our discussion. I mentioned earlier Alfonso. He's the Regional Vice President for Asia Pacific and Pacific of the IFC. So we heard Victoria talk about some of the things that the World Bank's doing, what the IFC is doing as well. So tell us a little bit specifically about what exactly you're doing, because we know the IFC has a role in trying to incentivize the private sector to take on more action in this. So can you give us examples of one or two IFC innovations in financing frameworks or investments that are really helping to tackle the marine plastics problem in the region?
Sure, thank you, Saranjit, and thank you to all of the country representatives, private sector leaders, civil society organizations, and all the participants today in this great seminar. So I think, as you mentioned, Saranjit, the private sector has a critical role to play in reducing plastic waste and usage. No? We have discussed it today, whether through innovations in packaging design, waste management, or developing new business models that support a transition to a circular economy, as we have here today. No? Actually, it is quite impressive and innovative and very interesting examples that we hear from different parts, public and private sector. But I think that it is time to really do more and to scale it up. So I really think that it is time to think big, to really think a little bit more on what can be done beyond what we have done so far. So at IFC, we are supporting businesses across the long plastic value chain, as well as banks and local governments, with financing, with advisory services or technical assistance, and what in our opinion is something critical that you mentioned before, developing public-private partnerships. Let me give you 3 examples to be more concrete. First, we are helping banks to develop innovative financing instruments such as blue bonds or blue loans, and these will support projects that help maintain our oceans and protect the millions of livelihoods that depend on them. We are also developing a blue bond loan framework, which will help to guide the development of this nascent market and maybe at some point become standards that can be used broader. Second, we are looking to collaborate with Mr. Logia and his team at Indorama Ventures to expand the recycling capacity in multiple Asian countries that are contributing to plastic pollution. And third, we are also working with solid waste management companies and recyclers to develop efficient and innovative ways to collect and process plastics and clean up rivers and oceans. We will also be sharing our knowledge and advice on setting up new scalable business models in emerging markets around the world, which I believe is critical, no? Because this is a global problem. It's not a problem that is just based on specific countries, not even in a region, though in East Asia Pacific is very critical, but also in other regions. So it is very important to bring all these experiences together and to learn from each other.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some great examples there, Alfonso, but tell us, what are you hearing specifically from the private sector when you talk to them to try to get involved? I mean, what are their key demands and expectations from national regulators that would really encourage them to try to boost their investments in this area?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And actually, I mean, the important, I would start from the idea that the private sector, what they like or what we like is predictability, consistency, and a stable regulatory environment. Uncertainty is the worst enemy for any private sector initiative. No? And with this in mind, there are some regulatory initiatives that we consider are particularly relevant. First, and while we acknowledge, and I especially acknowledge and defend the need to adopt best regulatory practices, it is also important to tailor some of these regulatory and policy practices to the individual countries and regions and try to really find the right size and, even more important, the timing for implementation. Plastic waste collection sorting is highly fragmented and informal in many emerging markets in Asia, and there tends to be less capacity for enforcing rules. So it is very important in adopting a phased approach based on piloting new approaches that can be very useful, especially in some cases. But second, and precisely as a consequence of the large fragmentation that we have today, it is important, where possible, to harmonize regulations within the region. The companies that we engage with, have regional supply chains in a way, no? Which makes, for instance, following one set of regulations in Thailand and a different set in Indonesia very difficult. So we really need to harmonize the regulations across the region so that we can facilitate the activity of those companies that operate in different markets through or along the value chain. For example, while some countries in Asia allow post-consumer plastic waste to be recycled into food contact products, there are others that do not, and this is a problem. And last but not least, to provide a level playing field for all companies, and this is very important. In the absence of policies and standards, progress is guaranteed to be uneven and slow. We need smart, constructive, proactive policies that promote innovative product designs, that reduce the use of plastics and support reuse and recycling, and not just policies that approach plastic pollution as a waste problem. We have to do both. We have to tackle both issues, and we have to work in both directions.
Thank you, Alfonso. Well, it's great hearing from both of you, Alfonso Garcia Mora, the Regional Vice President for Asia and the Pacific of IFC, And we also heard from Victoria Kwakwa, the Regional Vice President of East Asia and the Pacific for the World Bank. So thank you both, our hosts for today's event. And I'm very happy to say we are at the end of the event today. I mean, I hope you've enjoyed the discussion and the ideas presented. I mean, we certainly learned a lot. And it does seem that, unfortunately, there's no real one-size-fits-all solution in addressing the real big complexities of the marine plastics challenge that we've been hearing about. But it is a challenge for our time, and it is so encouraging to learn more today about what's being done in our region and what more can be done by our governments, the private sector, individuals, all of us, to make a real difference to this issue. So thank you once again for everyone out there watching. It's been a great pleasure to moderate this.